Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. You're about
It's
to head
been a
off to
while.
Japan, but we're going to squeeze in a quick episode before you disappear.
We have to. It's been a while, and so much has happened since our last weekly AI news recording. And we had a
Right.
chance to talk with Ted Shelton from Inflection. We interviewed Marcus Flair from Intel.
Mhm.
So many interesting conversations, so many exciting things are happening in this space. What about you? What are you excited about? What have you been up to?
I've been looking more into how AI is working with hardware. This is,
Mhm.
I think, where my personal interest is. I'm not sure. There is so much to talk about with regards to AI and its hardware connections, robotics, of course, drones, various other things. But yeah, it's hard to separate AI from anything else right now. The thing that's going on in my head is when I talk to people about an innovation, a change, a requirement, a feature that they're building, it all comes back to, does that actually need AI? One of the questions that a strategist reminded me of recently was, the question you should be asking about AI is, do you need AI? Could you do this without the compute energy? Could you do it with just normal analytical algorithmic thinking? Do you have to do this with AI? So I think that's a really good question to ask if you're in a position where you are about to make an investment in AI, whether that's hardware, software, or something which is a combination of those things. It really is sometimes necessary just to ask, does this actually need AI, or is there a solution out there that can do it just as well? And we've seen companies like SpaceX and others actually do very well when they go back to first principles and they ask questions. Does this have to be this level of complexity? Could we make it simpler? Could we use a different basic idea to get there?
Yeah. It's a fascinating question to ask. I'm going to zoom out a second and give our listeners some context as to what I've been up to personally over the last 2 weeks. So last week I was in San Francisco. You had TED AI and you also had a Masters of Scale,
Mhm.
and both were amazing conferences. Quick takeaways: I flew into San Francisco, and outside of taking a regular taxi once, all my transportation was in a Waymo. And I'll have to tell you something, Richard, that definitely feels like the future. It was a very interesting experience going in for the first time, feeling a little bit nervous about a car driving itself through the city.
Mhm.
But after 10 seconds, it just felt normal. It felt
Yeah.
like how everything should be. And I loved it. I think I'm looking forward to seeing Waymo and other self driving vehicles in other cities. I'm curious, have you gotten a chance to take one as yet?
Yeah, I was actually in a Waymo several months ago when I was in San Francisco. It's the user experience is great. I think the entire kind of end-to-end experience is wonderful. To agree with you that it feels very normal after a while. I think the company is still battling with this problem, which all AI models are battling with, which is the world model. It's
Mhm.
just so complex. The world models are really big, and recently saw a very funny video of, I think, six Waymos that were stuck in a intersection, all facing off at each other, trying to figure out which Waymo was going to give way first. So I think that's the typical problem, is that there is a level of common sense in there that is really hard to program. We can get into the technicalities of that in a second, but yeah, it's world models are very large and they're complicated, and they take a and that's why human beings have actually found shortcuts around that. The biology of intelligence is really interesting. Again, maybe another topic for another day, but something I've been digging into the last several months as well.
So actually, I'll just highlight. You go on the website, you'll see we wrote an article because Waymo actually raised $5.6 billion, and
Mhm.
for a company that just spun out of like Google's experimental labs projects to now be worth so much and to be leading the charge with autonomous driving in the U.S., it's an amazing testament to what Google is doing
Let's be
for it.
clear, they're not leading. They certainly have the best technology, but they are still only in what, a couple of cities right now. I don't think they're in on the East Coast at all. They're just getting going in terms of distribution.
They are, but I think they're definitely ahead of Tesla, which is the only other company. Cruise collapsed.
Well,
But
maybe we don't know because
well,
Tesla doesn't seem to
as in
release
we
anything.
haven't seen anything commercial from Teslas yet. Their self-driving Teslas are definitely there, but they haven't released their robot cabs as yet, or
Yeah.
robot taxis. That's what they're calling it.
Robotaxi. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do look really cool. I'm excited about those also. So definitely check out that article. But the bigger picture that I wanted to paint was that I've had the chance to talk to so many executives, to different content creators, to different business leaders, to VCs over the last 2 weeks from both coasts. And what I will say is that the energy and concentration of innovation that is in San Francisco is unlike anywhere that I've seen. And that is something to behold. If you're in the AI space, I think it's worth just having a trip over there, seeing the conversations that our people are having. But there are a couple of things I'm going to touch on. The first is this theme: everything everywhere all at once. I stole it from the
Mm-hmm.
movie from last year, but when we think of AI, I think it's important for business leaders to understand it, is that it's not just affecting one part of your business. It's not just affecting one industry. What is fascinating is just the pace of change, of innovation that we're seeing across the board. In our conversation with Marcus from Intel, he spoke about how Intel itself is reimagining marketing and sales and operations and design. But I also had the conversations with people from Hollywood, and they spoke about the challenges that they're having with creative tools that are disrupting their livelihoods, and how there's this sense of fear coming from a lot of the union workers and the unions themselves, but at the same time they don't want to miss out on that opportunity. And I saw where this week Disney came out and they're building an entire unit dedicated to overseeing AI across their organizations. And so you're seeing this tug and push that's happening in different industries. People are responding differently, but the conversations have been super exciting, super helpful, super insightful, and I can't wait more to share more in today's conversation about that.
Yeah. Let's dig in because listeners or watchers, our audience can certainly go over to the Marcus Fleur interview directly and see what Intel is doing. I think that was one of the highlights of my week was we had spoken to, or you had spoken to Ted from Inflection, and they had and Ted spoke specifically about the strategy that they are taking to market successfully, which is to create a hybrid solution. These are both on prem and secure cloud solutions where they build an environment in which you can train and custom build your own model.
Yeah.
So essentially, they give you a framework and then you can do with it as you wish. Now, why is this interesting? It's interesting because up until recently, what we've seen is the two ends of the market get really big, right? So we've got open source, Llama, Meta seems to have the handle on that area,
Hmm.
although there are others. And then we've got the very kind of popular public models, which are pre-trained. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means that you're using a model that's already got just about all the intelligence it's ever going to have. You can't customize that. You can't change that. And so if you're using ChatGPT or Claude, essentially what you're doing is you're borrowing intelligence that's been pre-trained into that model. What Inflection have decided to do is say, there's this big gap in the market. There are companies that need to build their own AI solutions,
Hmm.
and they can't just go and take somebody else's intelligence or somebody else's training algorithms, or even their just the perspectives and biases that they might have.
Yeah.
They need to have a model that's going to be specific to them. It may also need to be very secure because there's IP or some kind of
Hmm.
confidentiality associated with that. And of course, there needs to be some kind of air gap between that server where that model lives and the rest of the internet. So you can see a lot of applications here. They're also driving down the cost of that deployment, which is really interesting. $2 million for an AI server solution at the low end, I think, is really good. Ted also said that they're going to drive that cost down over time very quickly. So I think I may be misunderstanding what he said, but he said in about 6 months' time he expects to see it much lower than that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we spoke to Marcus from Intel, who is the Inflection partner, the technology partner. And where we see the interest there is Marcus is coming from NVIDIA. He ran their cloud group over there. He's now at Intel. And what they're saying is, sure, Intel might be a little bit behind some of the other chip makers, some of the other AI solutions, but they're not far behind, and they think they can get there really quickly by taking an ecosystem approach. So they're making investments alongside partners like Inflection and saying, hey, Inflection's already got a great solution. Let's support that, and then finding an entire marketplace or ecosystem of other partners that they can give their technology to and that way expand into the market. So they're not just selling direct. They're not just saying, hey, we have the solution. They're working through partnerships. So we don't know whether that's going to work or not, but it is the smart solution when you're an enterprise, because you want a trusted partner. You
Yeah.
want to know, hey, that is running on an Intel chip and I really trust that product. Or that's Inflection, I really trust those guys. So I think that's an interesting approach, and we will wait and see and find out if that becomes the way for Intel to both enjoy success for themselves, but also make successful products for their customers, and in turn, provide solutions to their customers that they can make themselves successful with.
I love that. And I think for enterprises, you definitely should take the time, if you haven't, to check out both podcasts. They're now available on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify. I think the conversations were really insightful. And Richard, to your point, I do think companies are at this point where they're trying to figure out the value of AI. Where should they invest? Where should they not
Mhm.
invest? But the big takeaway for me over the last couple of weeks is that this is going to require long-term thinking,
Mhm.
strategic planning, and certainly the returns are going to be not necessarily immediate. And so, yes, there is this approach that you can say, hey, do I need AI today? But even then, I think the question has to be, will I need AI tomorrow? And how can I start setting myself up for that? And so, even if you're not investing in the AI tool or product today, how can you start getting your team and employees educated and more literate around AI? How can you start getting your data policies in place so that when the models become more affordable or the solutions become right for your use case, you can adopt them faster? So I guess my point is, even if today you're not jumping on an AI product or solution, there's still a lot that you should be thinking about as a leader and doing
Yeah.
to prepare for that.
I agree. We've spoken about this before, and of course, we're big fans of experimentation and prototyping. We like the time boxed idea of taking an idea and seeing if you can find a solution for it, or to a problem that you might have, and finding a solution for it with a low cost entry level idea, or entry level solution, I should say. I think what we're starting to see is a reality check across the market. We predicted this as well. We
Mhm.
knew that some of the stocks were going to start plateauing and eventually start to lose value because they are overhyped. We know that for sure. We've seen that now with Nvidia this last couple of weeks. It's just not going up at all. And what we're also starting to see is that the companies that were left for dead, like the Intels, are saying, no, we're still here. We're still in the game. So I think that's just a reality check across the board. And if you're a company and you're wondering what to do, you need to be reaching out to people like us, for example, or other consultants who can help you guide the organization through those initial steps of experimentation. How do I get a prototype? How do I start somewhere? For example, I was talking to a big enterprise the other day. This is a Fortune 50 company. And they were saying, look, AI is not going to find its way into our stack very soon, but we already are giving all of our employees access to AI via the workplaces that they're using. We're also setting up secure places where they can do experiments. So they can create agents, for example. I think that's probably a fantastic entry step for most people, is build your own agent, do it in a secure environment, get some kind of connection to your data, which is a one-way street. In other words, it's secure. Maybe it's an API. That way, you're getting the data that you want, but you're experimenting within a safe, secure environment, and just find out, hey, how could this work? Or maybe approach somebody who's building agents for you and say, we've already got existing data. We'd like to be able to look at that data and make some inferences and some choices about that, some action related things. So I think there is no excuse to stand still and play the wait and see game. Anybody who's saying wait and see right now, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to go spend $100 million in AI tomorrow, but it does mean you have to start making small investments, running experiments, and bringing your team along, which is what we affectionately call AI literacy, which is you need to start bringing people into this conversation, giving them access to tools, giving them access to environments, safe environments that they can play with these things. So standing still means you're getting left behind. You have a choice. Do you want to get left behind, or do you want to keep going? It doesn't have to be a massive investment, but it does have to be some kind of investment.
I love that you brought that up. I'm going to do a shameless plug for our usage AI framework. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're in the Microsoft Skills for Jobs program, it
Hmm.
is available. LinkedIn has also just unlocked it for a limited time, and Microsoft has licensed it through 2027. And they shared some numbers with us. So, out of a 5-star rating, the course is rated 4.7 stars.
Hmm.
27,000 people across the world have now taken
Incredible.
the course, and they're looking to translate it into 3 more languages, which is going to be amazing. It's going to make it a lot more accessible, and the
Do we
feedback.
know what those languages are, Chris?
I know it was recently translated into Brazilian, so Portuguese, and I think it's going to be translated into Chinese, and I'm not sure what the other 2 languages are. I'll double check it and share in the show notes. But
Cool.
the feedback has been tremendous. Companies all over the world have reached out to us to just let us know how helpful that framework has been. And so, if you're a company out there, you're listening to this and you're thinking, I hear you, but I don't know how to get started, the
Mhm.
first thing I would say is go and check out our usage framework. It's available for free, and it's just a pragmatic and very strategic framework as to how you can start thinking about adopting AI in your organization. That said, I want to do a hot pivot to the creative industry because so much is happening when it comes to AI and the new creative tools that I'm excited about. I think if you're an artist or a content creator, or you're working in marketing within an organization, these are going to be tools that will empower you. They'll make your processes hopefully more efficient and faster. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple big stories that happened this week that
Mhm.
just kind of blew my mind, and I think people should definitely pay attention to. The first is that Wonder Dynamics that got acquired by Autodesk earlier this year. They released Wonder Animation, and
Mm.
this is such a big deal. It is crazy. So right now, you can literally just take a video of yourself, and then that can be applied into a 3D scene. You're not just getting a video output, you're getting an actual 3D rendered output that you can
Right.
then take to whatever 3D tool you'd want to use and continue your work. And so think of what this means for content creation, where you could just have somebody act out what you want the character to do. And then boom, you're able to have it processed and imported. That's going to speed up workflows big time. And drop the full stories on Maginative.
Hmm. And by the way, while we're on that particular topic, let's talk about Runway because they have added the ability to provide different camera angles and camera controls, which just looking at those tools and seeing how it works, I'm not even a video creator and I get excited by that.
Yeah, it's so crazy because you think this is just 1 year in. This imagine what this looks like in 5 years. It's like we also saw updates from Midjourney. They have a new update to their web interface that can allow you to edit any sort of photo, which is interesting because remember, up until
Mm.
now, Midjourney was all about generating AI
Hmm.
photos. And so for the first time, no, you can upload any photo that you have and you can use AI to manipulate the backgrounds and the content of the photo. And again, more tools that are in the hands of creators, giving you more choice and flexibility. And then the last thing I'll add is the big drop this week came from a new startup out of Israel called Descartes. And they unveiled an entire game engine called Oasis that generates a game in real time as you're playing it. As you click a mouse, as you move in a direction, it's generating the scene, the physics, everything on the fly. And I think that's a big game changer. And so they have this demo, which is like Minecraft. If you click on the article, you can go to the playground and you can basically see this being rendered in real time as you're playing the game. That's incredible. So, again, we're starting to reach to this tipping point when it comes to AI models and the creative space and how we can see that applied.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff if you're creative. I also want to mention one of the things you specifically wrote about this week was Learnabout, which is Google's new interactive platform. This is somewhat connected to their Notebook LM
Mhm.
story in the sense that it looks and feels a little bit like it came out of the same group. But yeah, let's just talk a little bit about that because that is also about AI literacy and using these tools on a daily basis.
Sure. Thank you for bringing that up, Richard, because I think so often there's so many tools that we don't get a chance to dive deeper into. And last year we broke the news about Notebook LM, and then everyone started to get excited about it. And I love that. But I wanted to just highlight additional tools that people may not know about that can be great for researchers, that can be great for students, and for anybody that's just generally curious, that's looking to learn. So if you
Mhm.
think of the old school way of getting content online, you'd probably head over to Google, you'd probably head over to maybe your favorite library, and you'd then search for either articles or content that can inform you. Earlier this year, Google announced this initiative with their Learn LM models that was designed about rethinking education and the learning experience to make it more immersive, more interactive, and more personalized. And LM was just one product out of that branch that really took off. But there's some really interesting other ones that, if you're looking for new tools, you'll definitely want to check out. So, Learnabout is essentially a personal tutor. Let's say you want to learn about the coral reef, or you want to learn about solar eclipses, or in my case, I wanted to learn about the transformer architecture. It's something that I'm trying to dive deeper and to learn more about. And you go there, you tell the AI that's what you want to learn about, and then it gives you all of these different learning paths. So it provides you with cards with different information, and it breaks it up to make it more digestible. But as soon as you learn something, other options as to what you may be interested in learning next. And it then takes you on this really cool personal journey that you can then follow up on with your questions, to ask it to clarify things. It's super interesting, the types of content that it brings up. It's more immersive than just a list of results that you would typically get from Google. It will bring up videos, it will bring up graphics and data. I think it's a super exciting way for, if I were a student right now, I would be loving learning. So this
Yeah.
is about.
I don't think it's just about students. We're all in now a phase where I think we've moved from being purely generative human beings in the sense of people don't get like a designer doesn't just get hired to make original design every single day. Clearly, they are working within a context, within a framework of other creators. So there may have been a time when you got hired as a designer, you're like, oh, make me a poster, be as creative as you want, go and create an album cover, be as creative as you want. Now, if you're working at a large bank or you're working at a
Mhm.
domestic defense company or something like that, you're working within a framework of a lot of other human beings. There is already creative work that's been agreed to. Maybe that's your design system, maybe that's your brand system, maybe that's all the elements that exist already within the context of your work, the code,
Mhm.
the docs, the specs. That stuff you're not just generating new stuff every day, but what you are doing is curating new solutions out of those things. And I think that's really critical here, is because
Yeah.
as we were raised, we were told, look, you got to go to school, you get really smart about something, essentially become a master or a craftsperson around a certain idea, or maybe become an expert, a SME, as they call them, as a subject matter expert. And then you went into the world and you used your knowledge to execute on the problems at hand. And a lot of those were original ideas. I really don't see a lot of that. Now, there is some of that, but I just don't see as much of that anymore. What I see is a ton of curation.
Mhm.
You get presented with a problem, and what your job is to become an instant master on a particular topic at a particular time within the framework or time temporal space of that problem. Hey, we've got a temporary problem, we need a temporary solution, or we've got this problem that we've never experienced before, what do we need to do? So in my case, I'm trying to get really smart about certain kinds of drones, certain kinds of energy solutions. I don't know anything about those things. I'm not a master of those. I don't have an engineering degree or anything. What I do have is these tools. And so I can jump into these tools and say, tell me what's happening in the energy market. The go deeper button, hit the go deeper button, hit the go deeper button. It surfaces more and more information. Eventually, I'm looking at the site, the documentation that's been produced by the scientists themselves with citations. I'm then able to follow those citations, watch a quick video.
Yep.
This is the standard of what is today. We are no longer people who are expected to know stuff. We are constantly being asked to be students. So as much as the notebook and learn about type tools have a almost like student like appeal to them, I'm finding that as a 54-year-old, certainly out of my learning prime years, I'm back into that learning prime
Yeah.
because I can jump into these tools. I can really get smart about something really quickly.
I love that. It's also maybe like a dopamine hit where each time you're like, I want to learn more, and you feel yourself leveling up as you go along. So I love that.
Yeah. And even when
So
I'm talking to people who are experts in these fields, they're like, hang on a second, where did you go to school? And I'm like, I went to the school of Google. Like, how did you know about that? I'm like, I
yeah,
watched 40 hours of YouTube videos. I read 20 hours of this stuff. And that's probably more than that person has done in 30 years.
it's funny because one of the things that my wife, she's a physician in the pediatric emergency room. And when she was doing her fellowship, she worked on graduate medical education and something called just in time learning. And the challenge that they were trying to solve is the fact that doctors typically have a drop off in skills when they're not
Mhm.
used. And so, if you have a doctor, for example, in the community and they're not doing certain procedures, and somebody comes in and that procedure needs to be done, or even a doctor in the emergency room, if you're not exposed to certain procedures on a regular basis, that skill falls off the cliff. And to your point, imagine tools like Learnabout or Illuminate that can quickly get somebody back up to speed with the latest evidence-based guidance in terms of what are the best
Mhm.
practices, etc. There are lots of use cases, to your point, where more optimized learning experiences will be super valuable. There are a couple other tools that I'm going to highlight from Google. The third one is Illuminate. And with Illuminate, it basically transforms a research paper into an audio podcast, similar to what you'll find in NotebookLM. What I love about
Yep.
this is that it's like a directory. So if you're just like, hey, I want to listen to something or I want to learn something, you go there and there are all of these cool research papers that you can just listen to. And so that's like a nerd's paradise. I'm just going there and I'm finding audio papers to listen to while I'm working. There's ShiftBot if you're interested in coding. But overall, I think the big thing that I wanted to communicate was just how much Google is investing in making information not just more accessible, but more actionable. And so I think the tools that they're putting out are pretty fascinating. And whether these end up being standalone products or they make their way into some other solution in the future will be super exciting. With that said, there's also two big announcements that happened this week. One, we had a chance to talk with Google engineers at their Google AI Cloud about their new grounding in search offering. And basically,
Mhm.
what this means is that if you're building a product and you need to get access to more real time information, because again, to your point, Richard, the pre trained models have a knowledge cutoff date. And so if you're building a solution where you need to ask it something and you need it to have up to date information, guess what? Google now offers that in its API. So you can build your own solutions that can pull in real time data from Google search. So it means a little bit less hallucination. It means more up to date information. So a lot of developers are super excited about that. But on the other hand, the other big drop this week on the same day was from OpenAI with
Mhm.
Search GPT. And now in ChatGPT, you have native web search. Richard, did you get a chance to play with this as yet? What are your thoughts?
I have only played with it once, so I'm a noob with this. Similar to what we saw with Learnabout or any of these other tools, is that I like the idea that you are not just getting a directory listing, which feels like old school, kind of, oh, these are the things, but
Yeah.
it's actually taking you down a certain path. So I think, again, I need to go down that path and experiment more. But what was your experience?
This will come as a surprise, but I'm not a big fan of using generative models for search. I think it boils down to trust. I think early on when I got exposed to I was very excited and eager to use AI for certain types of information and data. And then hallucination happened. And once it happened once, that doubt is in my mind as to can I
Mm,
trust the output of this or should I just go and get the blue links and go through them myself? And so while I think if I am doing research, if it cites sources that I can click on and verify myself, that'll be fine. But I haven't personally started to use like Perplexity or even Google search AI overviews. I tend to just go back to the original links. But I also don't find myself using Google as much as I used to anymore. I think the ways that I navigate the web and how I find information has shifted a lot, where it's more like I have curated sources of data that I know to go to.
Yeah.
versus doing a general search. And if I'm doing a general search, it tends to be around maybe a news article or so on. And I typically,
A
again, have
restaurant or something. Yeah, something
exactly right.
special. But I think this is where Learnabout fills that gap. Is the thing that I found most appealing about it is that it's helping me organize. So with Google, a typical Google search, the results page is just going to puke out all of the listings. It's going to
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
be biased in certain ways to things that have been there for a long time or that are hyperlinked to frequently and things like that. I much prefer this learn about style of learning, which is look, I have this thing that I want to know about. And then it's asking me, did what we provide you help you? And if so, what do you want to do about it? Do you want to know more about that? Do you want to summarize that? Do you want to know less about that? And I think it feels more conversational to me. I'm not sure that the GPT conversational element is there yet. I think it's still just like, oh, by the way, we have all these references, which is
Yeah.
fine. But what I like about an environment in which it's much more conversational is it's saying, hey, Chris, looks like you're headed down this road. Do you want to know more about that? Or was that an accidental thing? And I think this gets back to the way biology works is if your brain had to create a world model of everything that it sees, it would be impossible. Just
Hmm.
as we know, a game of chess, trillions and trillions of different ways to play chess. That's a simple game, never mind like the complexity of the universe. And
Hmm.
so what your brain does, it takes this shortcut. It does two things. One is it does hallucinate quickly about what your potential options are. It says, if you stop here, this is what's going to happen. If you move forward, here's what's going to happen. If you turn right here, this is what's going to happen. And then it allows you to make that choice. You say, based on, say, some kind of, I'm not going to say that this is the way our brains work, but like a Bayesian kind of ideal is that's worked for me in the past. And so I'm going to try and do that again. Or it worked for me in the past, but counterfactually, I don't really want to do that anymore because I actually want to do something different. So I'm actually going to go in the opposite direction. And this is the way that these AI models are starting to present themselves is that
Yeah.
initially they were just like, look, we had a trained model. It basically was algorithmic in nature in the sense that it was able to solve a certain kind of puzzle. And then you said, bah, that's not really enough because I need you to do a little bit of hallucinating because I need you to come up with new options.
Yeah.
And those options also need to be given me the opportunity of conversation like, wow, I like where you're going with this, or that's a little crazy. Let's not go there. And that's very similar to where human beings have evolved and neurology has evolved. We're starting to see that kind of the teasers of how AI is connecting to this general artificial intelligence.
So, one thing that you said that I'm going to echo and emphasize is the role that design plays in the overall experience that people have with products and services. If you're a designer, if you're a design shop, right now, this is a golden age for you. I know a lot of
Mm.
people look at where we are and they were probably intimidated, thinking, oh, design shops are going to be out of business. If you're looking for opportunity, you will find it because what I will tell you is all of these AI companies, they're in need of human-centered design solutions for their products. And you go in
Mhm.
and you show them how you can deliver a better experience. In fact, at Masters of Scale last week, Brett Taylor from Sierra, he's also the chairman of the OpenAI board. He spoke about what he thinks is a job of the future, conversation designers. He spoke about like web designers evolving as a thing when the web came. And he says, as we think about conversational interfaces, conversation design is going to be a big part of that.
It's just funny you should say this because it's actually not a new thing. I'm aging myself here a little bit, but 20 years ago, one of the things that we used to instill in our designers was to say, imagine that the interface is a conversation between the human being and whatever it
Mm,
is, the product or the service or whatever. Design it first as a conversation and then take that
love that.
and see whether that still makes sense when you create a design. A really good example of this is Uber, right? I walk to the sidewalk. I open up my app. I essentially say, call me the taxi or call me the car, right?
Mhm.
It then, the car responds, or the app in this case is like having that conversation saying, we have these options. Which one of these would you like? You say, I
Mhm.
would like this option. It says, we're going to go and tell that person that you're expecting them now. And this is a back and forth. And so this is not new to design, it is something that's implicit in good design. It was
Yeah.
forgotten about because what we started to do is say, well, that's the screen and everything started to be like, it's ADA compliant and it works
Hmm.
this way and works that way. And we forgot that this is actually a conversation.
Yeah. To your point, going back to first principles, right?
Mhm.
How are you solving that problem? And I love framing it as a conversation. All right. The last thing that I'm going to ask us to touch on, Richard, because I know we're running out of time, policy. Two big things happened over the last 2 weeks that I want to highlight. One, the White House mandated that every intelligence service needs to have a strategy about AI adoption. And I think that is very telling in terms of the strategic importance of AI to national security, but also
Mhm.
to the economic future of the country. And yesterday, Microsoft and A16Z came out with a joint statement on policy proposals that they would love to see when it comes to AI regulation. And this
Hmm.
is really interesting because these are two players that don't typically agree on many things.
Yeah.
Microsoft came from it from the perspective of big tech, and they spoke about the policies they have advocated for in the past. A16Z, of course, they carrying the banner for startups and small tech, and the policies that they outlined, I think, were pretty fascinating. And so I'd love to just kind of talk a little bit about what we see for the future of regulation. I'm just going to highlight some of the things they spoke about open source and the
Mhm.
importance of investing in open source as an organization, as a country. They spoke about open data commons. And this I thought was important. They highlighted the role that government needs to play in providing and making data sets available that are culturally appropriate, that also provide the nuance that we want to see reflected in the models and the AIs that we're using. And
Mhm.
I think that's a perfect example as to where government can really shine in terms of putting up standards to say, hey, if you're building a model, this data needs to be a part of that. And
Yeah.
it's data that we vetted and so on. They spoke about the right to learn, which was interesting. I liked how they phrased it. But it's this idea that copyright law right now seems to be posing a risk of stifling AI innovation. And so what that actually looks like in purpose, in action, I think is debatable. But I do think it's interesting just hearing that framing. But overall, they spoke about the need for the US government to invest in AI. I do agree in principle with a lot of what they're saying. Whether or not we want to admit it, we're right now in the middle of an arms race with places like China and or adversaries. This isn't just about AI that's on your computer to help you generate text. We're talking about robots. We're talking about military and defensive use. And we're talking about cybersecurity. And so
Yeah.
it is going to behoove us as a society to start having these conversations and to start talking about where we should be investing and what the opportunity is.
Love it all. Yeah. Yeah. It's a necessary step. I think we missed the boat on social media. We obviously saw that was a massive risk to security, to livelihoods, to teenagers. And so we need actors who are going to behave in the right way, in a positive way towards this. Yeah. I'm a big fan of that.
Awesome. All right. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. Richard, any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Yeah. Anybody that's in the defense space who is currently working on AI, love to hear from you. I want to interview you, want to talk to you. I think that's a massive story. I've been digging into it, talking to a lot of DoD people who are in my network. Yeah, lots and lots of stuff to dig into there. And I'd love to hear from anybody who's out there who would like to be on the show, or even just talk to us in a confidential way, and just share their ideas and their observations with us.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And the only thing I'll add to that, I'll be in Japan, as Richard said, for the next 10 days. So if you're in Japan and you'd love to meet up, just send me a message either on social media or just reach out to us via the website. But excited to meet all of you. Every time I travel, I meet so many fans of Maginative, and we love the feedback, we love the support. Maginative is a leading AI literacy platform for businesses. We provide executive education, employee training, and advisory and consulting services to startups, leading brands, and global organizations. Check us out at maginative.com, and you can find us on X and on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Until next time, one love.